22 KPAY's Morning News and More continues. Good morning, I'm Matt Ray. And joining us on the line, we have Fox News terrorist expert, Dr. Waleed Phares. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, as always. The war in Afghanistan, 10 years later, 10 years ago, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched by the U.S. and other countries. It's now officially the U.S.'s longest war, exceeding the Vietnam War. Dr. Phares, we had some early success early on, and when it started in 2001. But then in 2003, the Taliban had an insurgency campaign, and since 2006, it seems like it's just gone up from there. Am I right?
Yes. I mean, we have to look at the Afghan conflict, our involvement, as on two tracks. The pure military defense counter-terrorism track. That's basically when we brought down the regime, kept the Taliban at bay. They came back. We did a couple of these campaigns, including the surge, and we've maintained a balance of power with them, meaning, yes, they are still around, but no, they cannot. They haven't been able to take back the regime. But the second track is the war of ideas, is basically to engage the Afghan society, make sure that the next generation, which is now, is going to resist the Taliban on their own. That's where we have not been very successful, and that's what would determine our, exit strategy from Afghanistan, which should be a winning strategy, not a withdrawal strategy.
So how do you win that battle against making sure the future generations are able to defend themselves and not join up with the Taliban?
Well, that's the major question that we have been raising for year after year after year, meaning those kids who were 10 years old after Tora Bora in 2001 are now 20. These are the new soldiers, new officers, new teachers. Who was influencing them? Well, the moms, that's civil society, and the teachers, the 18 to 20,000 teachers in Afghanistan. Yes, we invested a lot in building roads and all sorts of construction projects, but we didn't do enough in terms of, engaging that civil society with women's movements, students' movements, artists, cab drivers, something that I would call the Afghan Spring. So now, if we want to exit based on a cutting of a deal with the Taliban, that would lead to a weakening of society. The Taliban will take over most of Afghanistan. If we engage as fast as we can with those civil society forces and empower them, then we may have a chance to reduce our forces gradually as civil society is rising against the extremists.
Am I correct in saying you're never going to change the thinking of the Taliban as far as the ideas of the Taliban, and they're always going to be recruiting?
There is no such thing as, first of all, good Taliban and bad Taliban. That does not exist.
Right.
It's either Taliban or ex-Taliban. If the Taliban will change their ideas, it means that they're going to reform. It means that they're going to abandon jihadism and all that ideology. That didn't happen. We haven't seen it. But the capability in recruiting is proportional to our capability of, informing and educating the people. Meaning, in a village, for example, if we have an alliance with local NGOs and the municipality, and we fund them and support them, in addition to the fact that we have kept a free space, security space, that's our military mission. If we have done that job, then the Taliban themselves, the Afghan themselves will reject the Taliban. That's the real measurement of victory.
Why, in your opinion, or why haven't we done this?
Because over the past, let's say, 4 years, that would include the last year and a half of the previous administration and this current administration, the bureaucracy in charge of the so-called war on terror or the war of ideas did something, unthinkable. That is not to identify the ideology. If we do not identify the jihadist ideology as such, how can we fight it? How can we go to the Afghans and tell them, this is the equivalent of fascism and totalitarianism, and, democracy and pluralism is the equivalent of freedom? If we haven't done so, then how are we going to educate those young men and women, as we saw, for example, across the Arab Spring, whereby we see the Islamists on the one hand, but we see the secular youth. That was our failure, and I hope that there will be a change of direction in our way of dealing with issues in Afghanistan, and we catch up with what was lost.
You said you would hope, but like I said earlier, this is officially the U.S.'s longest war. Where do you see it going from here on the anniversary?
I think the most important achievement, historians will tell us, is to bring down the Taliban, to give a chance, 10 years, a decade, to civil society to be able to defend itself. Now the jury is still out. If our strategy is to end the war by cutting a deal with the Taliban, those efforts for 10 years will go. If our strategy is basically, yes, start withdrawing from Afghanistan, but in return supporting civil society, we need to have a policy, a crafting that we don't have. But if we do, then we have a chance to have the Afghans themselves defending their own country.
Fox News terrorist expert Dr. Waleed Phares, thank you very much, sir. As always, we appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right.